In this episode of Cosmic Sponge, a Bigfoot is suspected of killing chickens close to home, which leads to a discussion of the ultimate trap for Bigfoot, bears, and Old Joe. A Kentucky house is haunted by a little demon girl who refuses to stop playing. And then we head to Africa to discuss the mass UFO sighting that was so compelling it caught the eye of Harvard's head of psychiatry, John Mack. We even have time to go back in time to discuss the case of the missing Batman. But what I can tell you with absolute certainty is that I had a Batman with a Batmobile, and that my brother Clint had shifty eyes.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we discuss weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Coe.
Tonight we are looking into a very interesting UFO encounter. This is the Ariel school UFO incident, which occurred in southern Africa, Zimbabwe more specifically. There were numerous UFO sightings around the area. All of these sightings culminated into a very unusual UFO encounter that involved 62 school children seeing a flying saucer land, and some of the occupants got out and made telepathic connections with some of the school children. We're going to jump into that shortly, but Jimmy, what have you been up to this week?
I've been trying to capture a Bigfoot.
Again?
Again, yes.
He's not been after your chickens, has he?
Maybe. Actually, I had not considered that until you mentioned it. It's entirely possible it was a Bigfoot that killed my chickens.
Well, did you see any large footprints or anything around the chicken coop?
No, but to be fair, I wasn't looking for them. I was looking for raccoon tracks. It was like, I wonder if these raccoon tracks are under these Bigfoot prints. I bet they are. So nestled deep in the woods of Jackson County, Oregon, I was looking for some inspirations for my trap. I found out there's a trap that was built to capture a live Bigfoot. It's situated in Rogue River, Siskiyou National Forest, around 3.1 miles from the border with California. The trap, which is often hailed as the only one of its kind, was built in 1974. By the now defunct North American Wildlife Research Team in a bid to capture the elusive hominoid.
How does this trap work? Because I'm thinking not only may it capture a Bigfoot, but I'm assuming that it could capture other bipedal animals such as people, perhaps, or at least a bear or something, right?
Well, it's interesting you said that. So it measures 10 feet by 10 feet. It consists of a wooden box with a metal door capable of automatically closing should anything happen to wander inside. For its first 6 years, researchers baited the trap with carcasses. However, they only ever caught bears. And some guy called Joe, who was snacking at night and ran out of food. But
yeah, they should put a sign up that says Bigfoot trap, not bear trap. Move along.
That's right. So for those bears that can read. Well, the years that followed, the trap had started to fall into disrepair. In 2006, the U.S. Forest Service began to actively repair and maintain it, thus turning it into something of a visitor attraction. And even to this day, it remains a popular destination for hikers on the Collings Mountain Hiking Trail. Now, whether Bigfoot has ever been tempted to check it out, however, remains a mystery because we have no indications a Bigfoot has ever even wandered by it.
I find that amazing that the U.S. Forestry Service would maintain that trap. I mean, I was thinking about that. I was thinking, as soon as you told me that someone had built a Bigfoot trap, I'm thinking how dangerous that could be, either to people, human beings, or, of course, I'm assuming that maybe it's obvious that it's a trap to a human being. I know the place I used to work in, sort of central West Virginia, we had a bear that would come around the location at night. We had some truck drivers that would come and spend the night before they unloaded their cargo. The following morning, they would see this bear. It would come get in the dumpster and literally get on top of the dumpster, jump up and down on it and bounce the lids up, then get down in the dumpster and look for food. And they set a big, giant trap back there to try and capture this bear, and it was nothing more than a large, very large culvert pipe was set up like a box trap. He goes inside, goes after the bait, and then, the door shuts. They never did capture it. I guess it was too smart. So I'm thinking if it's a trap that's so obvious that you couldn't capture a person in it, I think Bigfoot or the Bigfoots out there in the world are likely too smart to fall into this trap.
I disagree. I've known some guys who they'd be out in the woods and be, I smell something. I think that's a deer carcass. I'm a bit peckish. let's wander in this building with this deer carcass. Have something to eat.
A bit peckish.
bit peckish.
You look a little peckish tonight.
I just got back from eating dinner. I had a good dinner. I didn't even finish it all.
I have a story.
Hit me.
So there is a woman who's terrified by her new home that she claims is haunted by the demon girl who refuses to leave. A woman claims that she's been left terrified by this demonic spirit haunting her home, which takes the form of a little girl. The victim had recently bought the house when she first heard a child's voice call out hello from a nearby empty room. The haunting has worsened in recent days. She hears pounding on walls, footsteps, and personal items moving from shelves. She says, I have a demon in my house and I need help. I didn't know it was a demon at first, but it got worse and worse when my husband left for work for a couple of months. Man, he's got a hell of a commute. The girl started to become more present with footsteps, pounding, stuff falling. It became worse. I had someone mow my lawn. He said, how many kids do you have? I said, none yet. His eyes got big and said, I was wondering because I kept hearing a little girl laugh in the house before you came home. It's been terrifying. I keep waking up at 3 a.m., like wide awake with no explanation. That happened at Amityville, didn't it?
Sure.
Maybe like 2:45 or 3:15 or something like that.
I don't know.
In the movie, anyway. I hear knocking on my door randomly. My dog has stopped eating and keeps sitting in front or behind me. He keeps walking up and down my room and laying in front of my bedroom door. I hear things being knocked over, and I feel like I'm going crazy. Oh, she's from Kentucky. She said she recently bought the house, so she's unable to abandon it. She also reported a vile, rotting stench coming from her bathroom. Well, I would call a plumber for that.
Definitely. Hey, how old is this woman?
It doesn't say. I get the impression that she's younger. Just she said that she hasn't had any children yet.
Right. So if she's a millennial, all she needs to do is designate the house as a safe space, and then the demon will have to stand outside on the porch.
Well, she has reached out to a local church to try and get some help.
That's wise. Yep. Depending on what kind of church. If it was like Church of Scientology, she's out of luck. But I mean, if it's like a Catholic
it doesn't
church.
Say. Probably like, Methodist or something.
Greek Orthodox.
So Yvette Fielding, who's the host of Most Haunted, as well as a podcast, Paranormal Activity with Yvette Fielding, she suggested a few things. She said the house may need blessing. Her first stop would be her church of faith. In each denomination, they have a person who can help and give comfort and blessings. In most of these cases, you usually sort things out. If that fails, call a qualified spiritualist, which can be found in her local spiritualist church. They can also come and help. As with all these things, she has to do her homework, as there are many charlatans out there who would ask her for money to cleanse the house.
I wouldn't ask her for money. I go cleanse it.
Yeah, but you'd use like a pressure washer or something. I don't think that's what they need to do right here.
No, I would make a picnic basket, fill it with like some Sumerian tablets and maybe a spirit box, a little EMF reader, magnetometer.
I want to try one of those spirit boxes, man. I think that'll be really cool.
We should do it. We should do it for the show.
Yeah, I plan to do that sometime. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know when exactly.
We'll have to call up Les. He'll know which spirit box we should get, or Jason.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, Les has experience with one.
Yeah.
We'll have that show on Shawnee Lake down here, so maybe. I think that would be a fun experiment.
I'm
It's
in.
supposed to be haunted.
I'm in. I'm up for a road trip.
Yeah, come on down. We'll explore the haunted amusement park. All right, well, let's move on to tonight's main topic. But before we do, I would like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. Check out our webpage at cosmicsponge.com. There you will find the web store and also ways to help support the show, such as buy me a coffee and another link in the upper right-hand corner that is for Patreon. If you choose to support us on Patreon, you gain access to another show that we do exclusively for our Patreon supporters called Weird Wonders. As soon as you sign up for that, you gain access to all the shows we've recorded so far. I would also like you to visit Instagram. Just look for Cosmic Sponge. Jimmy has some brand new ones if you haven't been there for a while. I haven't even seen them yet, but I'm sure they're hilarious. And last but not least, look for us on Facebook, because the story about demon children haunting a house in Kentucky and Bigfoot traps all in one place, plus many other paranormal and kind of weird science news stories can be found on our Facebook page. And again, just look for Cosmic Sponge. Let's move on to our main topic. We're going to be looking at the Ariel School UFO encounters. And Jimmy, I know you've done some legwork on this one, of course.
I'm really excited about this one because, thank God, it doesn't have anything with bizarre details or an overabundance of strangeness attached to it. And that usually saturates a lot of these stories we cover. I like things that are more mainstream. So without these...
Don't have a lot of like Spanish names, too, or Russian names.
Thank goodness. So without any bizarre details or strangeness built into this story, let's just jump into it. Gunter attached the recently modified hot plate to the shaft of a repurposed golf club.
Sorry. I just never know where you're going to start. I never know when you first start what's going to be coming out of your mouth, man.
Fair enough.
Sometimes you catch me a little off guard.
What had once been used to scramble eggs and invoke cursing on manicured fairways now would serve as a metal detector. Would now serve as a metal detector capable of locating coins under 20 feet of hard clay or making the neighbor's cat run into block walls from across the street. He placed the newly constructed detector on the table next to a magnetometer crafted from an easy bake oven and his trusty Geiger counter that doubled as an AM radio. As he waited for his ride, he tuned into the local news, eager for any information concerning the adventure of which he would soon embark. He was rewarded almost immediately as a newscaster's voice could be heard announcing recent local events concerning UFOs and aliens. Gunter listened intently. Sightings of UFOs and unusual beings from Wednesday to Friday of last week culminated in a mass sighting at the Ariel Primary School, where up to 62 tiny tots witnessed the landing of a silvery craft and its occupants, which some students described as little Michael Jackson clones in shiny black wetsuits. Some of the reports claimed the little moonwalkers I'm sorry. Skipped around the site communicating with the children using some sort of big-eyed telepathy, with messages ranging from warnings of environmental disaster to, ooh, come on over here, little children. I have some wine-flavored ice cream for you. Shamoa, ooh. BBC reporter Tim Leach and MUFON regional representative Cynthia Hine has been called in to investigate the scene. We hope to have more on this for you later. Now it's time to knock off another hour of this 1982 fan favorite from Michael Jackson. You're listening to Pretty Young Thing. Just then, Gunter was startled by the blaring horn from a 1972 Ford Pinto. In the driver's seat was Cynthia Hind, his ride to the Ariel Primary School, and a UFO investigation of a lifetime. He grabbed his equipment and sprinted to the door. Today was the day Gunter was sure he would secure his place in the history books as the genius who built the equipment that would prove the existence of visitors from outer space once and for all. That, or he'd just be a background character in a footnote of the school paper.
A footnote in the school paper.
Gunter is one of my favorite characters in this whole story. His name's Gunter Hoffner, and he has got some of the most interesting witness testimony, which we'll eventually get to, but I think we probably should start chronologically with his story.
This Ariel School sighting is a pretty big case. John Mack, a Pulitzer Prize winning Harvard psychiatrist, became interested in this story. Now, he was already interested in UFO abductions and had published one book on it already. One interesting set of documents that I rounded up was a newsletter that this UFO investigator, Cynthia Hine, had published back in those days. She published 22 UFO Afra News issues from 1988 to 2000. The one we are looking at right now is issue number 11. It discusses the encounter at the school with the children, but there were a few sightings before that happened.
Just to give some context about the location before we go into the details about the dates. Ariel Primary School is a private school. It's located in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, which is about 20 kilometers, which is approximately 12 miles away from Haware, Zimbabwe. Ruwa is a really rural area. Not a lot of people there, and the people that are there tend to be farmers. It's a large farming community, so these big farms do have some wealthy people involved there. And this was a private school where those wealthier people would send their schools. It wasn't cheap, and you had a broad spectrum of people, a very diverse group of people who went to the school. The kids ranged from the ages of 6 to 12, and it was a primary school, which for us in this country is an elementary school. It was surrounded by really rough terrain with tall grasses, gum trees, rock outcroppings, that kind of thing. They had these large logs that separated the playground or the school area from all of that rough terrain logs that had set up to create a perimeter. So the event takes place in September, specifically on Friday, September the 16th. Prior to that, we have some events that happen starting on Wednesday, September the 14th. There was another elementary school, which is the Peterhouse Elementary School, and there approximately 100 children claim to have seen a flying saucer in the sky during the daytime. We get later into the day, starting 8, 9 o'clock at night, we have what a lot of astronomers were saying was a meteor shower. And I had heard something along the way that there was also a possibility that what people were seeing that night was either fireworks from a large display that was going on that night or a Russian satellite, the re-entry of a rocket from a Russian satellite or something like that. Do you have something on that, Steve?
What I have here is 2 days prior to the incident at Ariel, there had been a number of UFO sightings throughout southern Africa. There had been numerous reports of a bright fireball passing through the sky at night. So there was a radio station out, ZBC Radio, and I guess somebody had called into the radio show and said they saw this lights or UFOs. The radio station actually began requesting people to call in with their reports. Many people had called in and to call in and describe what they had seen. Some witnesses interpreted the fireball as a comet or a meteor, and it resulted in this huge UFO wave, everyone talking about it over the next few days. According to Brian Dunning, a well-known skeptic, says the fireball had been the re-entry of a Zenit 2 rocket from Cosmos 2290 satellite launch. So that would have been a Russian satellite launch, and the booster broke up into burning streaks as it moved silently across the sky, giving an impression of a light show to millions of Africans. Most likely is what that event was. Cynthia Hind, who we've just talked about, that published these journals, she recorded some other alien sightings at the time, including the daylight sighting by a young boy and his mother, and report of alien beings on the road by a trucker. But as far as the large light show is concerned, most likely that was the re-entry of the Zenit 2 rocket stage. It was a booster rocket breakup, basically. And I have some of those described in here. And I found this pretty interesting because now she writes all of this started around 2050 hours. Sightings had started pouring in from Botswana, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, covering a period of approximately 10 to 12 minutes. Many people also heard a sonic boom, apparently. Very loud boom after they saw the debris. It says the general consensus of opinion was that the lights were preceded by a ball of fire, which seemed to have a point to it and a long tail of sparks. It was of white or goldish color, lit up brilliantly in the sky. Some people saw 3 huge lights at the front with smaller lights behind, the count of the number of lights varying between 8 and 20. Many people reported that the objects were traveling very fast from north to south, others that it moved more slowly, and one man actually walking along with it for more than 100 meters. There's definitely a great variety of reports. So she had talked to an amateur astronomer who said he thought it was a meteor shower, said it was the most spectacular one he had ever seen. At first, he said he saw only single meteors, but then it hotted up and began to break up, and at least 2 showers, bigger chunks were breaking up and scattering their fragments. I don't want to spend too much time on these sightings. She goes into a lot of depth about it and talks to several different people, but I do find it interesting that some people saw what clearly was that rocket stage or that booster rocket breaking up. What the astronomer described is exactly like video that I've seen, for instance, when they dropped Skylab, did a controlled crash into the Pacific Ocean a number of years back. I mean, that's exactly what these things look like when they're breaking up, just these fireballs and flaming, and I'm sure it was a spectacular sight. And the fact that there was a sonic boom accompanying the sightings, the visual sightings, almost assuredly means that's what it was. But I find it interesting that some people literally drew an object. Some people drew like fireballs, but then some people drew objects that were like cigar-shaped objects with lights, like rows of lights, green lights, red lights. Some people drew a rocket shape with fins, lights in the front, windows on the side. It just really varied. I mean, in some ways they're very similar, but in other ways, it just goes to show you that people were seeing, in a way, different things. And also the estimation of the speed was very different. Most people saw it moving very quickly, but then a few people said that it was moving slowly, but it almost assuredly was this rocket stage breaking up. But it did leave Cynthia Hine, who was the investigator, wondering if there was more than one object even sighted that night.
Right. So we have multiple sightings happening on Wednesday and Thursday. The big ones on Wednesday are the Peterhouse Primary School. 100 students saw something in the sky. Also, they had a disruption of their electronic devices, so the intercoms at the school, the bus CB radios, those kinds of things were interrupted for a certain period of time. Then we have the trucker who sees a strange humanoid on the side of the street while making an early morning delivery. And then we have the mother and her child who attended Ariel school who saw some kind of spacecraft in the road ahead of them. On Thursday, Colin McKay later would say that some of the students at the Ariel school had reported seeing cigar-shaped UFOs in the skies during the day. And then we get to the main sighting that we're really going to cover. We just want to make sure you understand that prior to that Friday, on Wednesday and Thursday, the region had already been hyped up to some degree concerning UFOs in the skies above them. So we get to Friday, and Friday they have a weekly staff meeting with all of the personnel at the school. Colin McKay is the headmaster, and he has all of the staff come inside while all the children are outside on the playground. This is at 10 a.m. in the morning, and the only adult in the area is Allison Kirkwood, and she is manning the tuck shop. I didn't know what a tuck shop was. Maybe this is...
Did you look it up?
I looked it up. So a tuck shop is basically like the things we have in this country. You'll go to like a ballpark or something like that, and you'll have these little concession stands, essentially. And it's sort of like that, but they also have sandwiches and chips and those kinds of things that the kids can purchase there at this little tuck shop that's off to the side.
Oh.
The kids are out playing, and some of the kids witness this strange sighting of some aerial phenomena that's coming along the power lines to the right of the playground. I looked at the map that was supplied by Cynthia Hine, and if you look at it, there is to the right of the playground out in the brush area, these really heavy power lines that run alongside the right and then go down to the bottom and then run parallel to the playground further down in the brush and then keep running off to one side. Most of the children identify some kind of aerial object that goes off to the third pole down this electrical line and lands. And then some alien creatures get out. And what do these alien creatures look like? Some of them say that it looks like Michael Jackson. That was something that they had equated it to. Some said that they were black with porcelain white heads. They were dressed all in black with shiny wetsuits. And then others say that they were really hairy with long hippie hair is the way they
Most of them said they had hair, black hair.
Right.
Yeah.
The one thing that they're all consistent on is the eyes. They described them as large like a rugby ball. They were pointed as if they slanted upwards. and that they sat lower on the face, like where our cheeks would be. They had no nose that they could really see, and a small straight line for a mouth. They were short, about a meter tall, a little over a meter tall. Depending on which child you ask, there were between 1 and 4 of them, either sitting down or walking around the ship that had landed.
Yeah, I think one had, at least one reported that it was standing on top of the ship.
Correct.
And there's other reports that there were more than one flying saucer there. Some children saw more than one. Yeah, all the kids come running in all excitedly with all this information, and the staff immediately just thought they were just playing a game or being kids or whatever, and sort of,
I love it because they run up first to the woman, Allison, who's manning the tuck shop, and they come up to her and they're like, "Hey, there's something weird going over here with the beyond the playground in the woods." And she's like, yeah. You guys are just trying to get me away from here because you little bastards are trying to get my sweets. Steal the stuff in here.
Yeah.
I'm not trusting you. But then when her own kid who attended the school came up, along with a couple other kids, and said, hey, there's something going on here. She's like, okay, go in and get the staff and have them come out.
So at the time, none of the adults really investigated this. So all the witnesses are pretty young children. The 62 of them witnessed this event, but it wasn't until the next day that word kind of got out, because all these kids went home and told their parents what had happened. So a lot of the parents started calling the school saying, what's this about a UFO landing with the kids down here? And then somehow the word got out, and that's what got Cynthia Hind in the news, the BBC, descends on the school and started asking these kids a lot of questions about what they saw. There are some differences for sure, but then there's a lot of similarities as well. This incident is also covered at the very end of the Phenomenon movie. That's what Jimmy and I talk about this all the time. This movie, we've both seen it, both like the work that was done, very well made. And they show the interviews from 1994 of the children that the BBC did. And also John Mack comes down a couple of months after that and questions the children on what they saw. Get these really young school children being very frank about what they're saying. Interestingly, in the phenomenon, they round up as many as they could of those children who are grown adults now. This incident happened in 1994. It had been nearly 20 years. It was really quite interesting because they were adamant as adults that something happened there, and they could recall what they had seen. In fact, it's probably the most compelling thing about that entire movie, I think. I have what some of the kids said. Now, this accounts from 1994. And they said, obviously, that some of these children, there's cultural differences, because some that had grown up in Africa and had African parents. Now, that is one thing that you'll notice when you watch the phenomenon. Again, this is a expensive private school. So there is many more wealthy kids that have Western ancestry, European ancestry, than you would expect, I would think, from a school in Zimbabwe.
No, that's correct. I mean, it's important to point out that you have these Europeans that are there, as well as members from the Shoni and the Nabola tribe.
Some of the children who were native to Zimbabwe, or their parents were native and their ancestors had lived there for a long time, viewed the aliens as some African creature called a tokolosh, which was a creature that would gobble children up if they were naughty. It was sort of like a boogeyman creature their parents would tell them about.
Right. So I looked up pictures of those things.
Yeah.
Did you look up pictures?
No.
They look like little gremlin. That's what they look like.
Do they have slanted eyes and stuff?
Some of them did. Some of the pictures, sure. And there were varying things, but they all remind me of sort of like the Dungeons and Dragons gremlins, or like gremlins from the movies, something like that.
And you know what? If you think about it, and you think about The Passport of Magonia, where Jacques Vallée compares cultural stories, elves, and in Africa here with this tokolosh, in other areas, leprechauns, goblins. He draws a comparison of those stories with modern stories of UFOs. That could be the origins of the tokolosh. It's possible that a cultural way to look at alien visitation, if this is a phenomenon that has always existed with humans even since ancient times. According to Cynthia Hind, I'm not sure where she comes up with this idea. She says that the Western children, mostly, but not all, were aware of UFOs. So where they drew pictures, it was almost identified as a UFO and a little man in black which they labeled aliens. In the drawings from the other ethnic groups, the labeling was different. The little men were called unidentified person, and the craft or whatever was called a machine or the object. Even though some of the way they looked were similar, the interpretation of what it was from these children, again, these are pretty young children. One boy, aged 11, said the object was striped green and black and silver. And another boy had said that. One boy told me that he thought at the first that the little man in black might have been Mrs. Stevens' gardener, but then he saw the figure had long, straight black hair, not really like African hair, so he realized he had made a mistake.
I like that the one kid says, he looks like the gardener. And the gardener's like, I ain't got no hippie hair. What you talking about, kid?
One young girl said when she first looked, she saw 3 figures, one in red, one in white, and one in black. The one in black was sitting on the spaceship. This was the first time the word spaceship had been used, and she had admitted that she had presumed what she saw was a UFO. Another child said that the objects were disc-shaped and were glinting among the trees before landing. He pointed out the landing place as at the third pole from the school grounds, and the objects had come in along the electricity wires. Of the little man, he said he was quite lightish in color, not black. His clothes were black, but there was no noise, and they disappeared into the valley down below. Oriana said, I saw this black stick, a very thin, long thing, on top of the silver thing. Nathaniel said he saw a ship land on the ground. It had an elongated hull with a platform around the side, and a small man in black was running around. He was about 1 meter tall. Another boy named Luke said, I saw the little man. He had long black hair and was all in black. He looked like a shadow of something. Daniel said, I saw the silver thing among the trees with one thing sitting on the side and another on the top. Then they were running back and forth. It looked like a real person, but it was quite plump. At first I thought it was someone from the compound playing around, but his hair was not like the usual African hair. It was very curly and close to his head. It was almost like a hippie's hair, long and black.
Yeah, well-fed hippies running around the brush.
Yeah, and then Emily said, I saw little men with longish black hair and big black eyes. They turned around and stared at me and went back into the ship. There was only one ship and some little ones scattered around it. I could see their big eyes and long hair. I definitely saw them. And then the last one I'll say is Charity said, I saw the silver thing and a person in black alongside it. It looks like a saucer. And then whenever the BBC asked her if she'd ever heard of UFOs, she replied, I've never even heard of UFOs before. There's a few drawings of them. They're pretty consistent. And then, of course, when you see the alien drawings from most of the kids, it's the classic big black eyes, right? I mean, that we always hear about.
So there were a couple of the ones you haven't mentioned of the eyewitness accounts. One was from a child. His name is Guy Gibbons. He's probably one of the more chatty ones. He was the one who helped point out the location. He's one of the older boys, 11 or 12, who helped point out the location for Gunter Hoffner, who was the individual that showed up with Cynthia Hind to go out into the field and take soil samples and use his magnetometer. He has an EMF reader as well as a metal detector and a Geiger counter. So he goes out there based on Guy Gibbons' testimony as to where it had landed, and that's at that third pole of the high power lines.
You know, I found it very interesting that when we look at the Westall 66 sighting, where did all the children see this UFO turning on its side and moving around? Over the electrical wires, remember?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's been a lot of theories out there that UFOs can somehow absorb electricity from perhaps. I mean, but I just found that to be very coincidental. I think there's actually a high tension wire down at the Westall School that this UFO was hovering around and spinning around, and that's what the children all saw. And then here we are, UFOs, following the electrical lines.
Yeah.
Before they land.
Very unusual. Guy witnesses it pretty much the same way some of the other kids have. This ship or vessel going down along the power lines. He said he saw glittering on the rocks. At some point, he witnessed burn marks and this is a 12-year-old who's claiming that he saw this, but that the next day they were gone. He said that there was a bigger man with 4 or 5 smaller ones running around. They were in a diving suit that was shiny. There was glinting in the trees like a disc. He's the one that really pointed out that the eyes were further down on the face, closer to the cheekbones rather than where our eyes are. Guy was a little bit further back than some of the other kids. Some of the kids were closer up to the event than he was. He said they were very thin. They had light skin. They were slightly taller than a grade 5. There was no noise from the craft. It didn't land but was in the trees. And suddenly it disappeared very quickly down into the valley. It was quite high off the ground, which is counter to what some of the other kids had said. That was his account. I did notice that there was another child, Emily Watson, I think was her name. Was that Emily Watson? Or Emily Trim? One of those two had noticed that there was a high-pitched sound. It sounded like a flute playing, is the way she described it. And that was Emily Trim, I think, who said that. And then there's Emily Watson, who said little man with long black hair. Only got a glimpse of him. They went back in the ship. There was a big one with a few little ones running around again. They had big eyes, and she was very afraid of them, had a sense that they were trying to get her to come with them. And she saw the ship, thought it was a UFO. Really interesting one was Emma Jellick Christensen. She said that the ship went up just a meter before it disappeared. Again, says a black kind of shiny suit, very tight fitting. She only got a glimpse of the faces, was able to identify that the eyes were quite big, and was afraid because it was something she hadn't seen before. And she knew about UFOs and had watched them on television, and they communicated with her that we were making harm on the planet. Also was trying to call her over to them. And she claims there's about 4 creatures, and that they moved much like, now she didn't say this was interpreted by some other people who had interviewed her, but they likened it the way that they were describing it as if a moonwalk, where they were skipping in the air, which I thought was a little bizarre. Now, one of the Liesel, Liesel, I think is her name, is how you pronounce it. It's Lisil, and I had to spell something. She is actually one of the ones, because I think it was about 7 that I saw that they 20 years later were able to find about 6 of these students that they'd brought back and had on camera to follow up what their thoughts were 20 years later. She, at the time, said that there was a silver shape that was on its side, saw a black man dressed in black with really big eyes. She thought it was an alien or the gardener. They ran to the logs, and this creature's within a meter of her.
Yeah, very close.
Yeah, could reach out.
I remember that from the phenomenon.
Yeah, she got a horrible feeling that there would be no air, the people would be dying, there would be no trees, and this was communicated to her through the eyes, she said. She would really love to see him again so that she could ask him why he was on Earth and what does he want with them. And so the principal becomes aware of this shortly after, and he has all the kids go in and make drawings of what they saw and collects those up. Contacts Cynthia Hine because she's well known in the area for tracking down UFO stuff. Cynthia contacts Tim Leach of the BBC. They both go down along with Gunter Hoffner the following Monday. Cynthia wanted to go before that, but the principal's like, well, let's just come in on Monday. You can talk to the kids and, you can do whatever investigation you do while you're here. So that's how Tim Leach gets involved, how Cynthia Hine gets involved, and how Gunter gets involved. Tim Leach, being a BBC reporter, had some kind of connection, at least that was my sense of it, with John Mack of Harvard. So he contacts John Mack and says, this is the real deal. You should come down here and check it out. So John Mack would arrive in November, a couple months later.
Now, the reports of the telepathic communication didn't actually emerge until the John Mack interviews.
That's correct.
And there's a couple of things that I'll just point out, that all of these people, including Cynthia Hine and the BBC, had interviewed these children. They didn't do them individually. They did them as a group. There's a little bit of concern, being especially young children being impressionable, that I think they were interviewed in maybe even groups of 6, but they weren't really interviewed individually. Like they were able to play off each other's ideas and things like that. So there was a little bit of an issue taken by that. But I don't think anything about the telepathic communication came out until John Mack paid his visit.
Yeah, I think that's the way he asks these questions. So, little kid, when the creature was telepathically communicating with you about environmental issues, what did he say?
Right. And when you watch him on The Phenomena, because in the Phenomena movie, they show John Mack interviewing some of these children. He does seem to be leading just a little bit, but on the other hand, he's a
child psychologist.
Harvard psychiatrist. So, I mean, who am I to judge someone who knows how to talk to people and been trained professionally to discuss things like this, I guess, with people. So I'm just an observer. John Mack, he was an American psychiatrist, writer, professor, and the head of the Department of the Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. In 1977, he won a Pulitzer Prize for his book, A Prince of Our Disorder, which was about T.E. Lawrence, which of course was Lawrence of Arabia. As the head of the psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School, his clinical expertise was in child psychology, adolescent psychology, and the psychology of religion. As his career progressed, in the early 1990s, he became very interested in the UFO abduction phenomena, which of course was very popular at that time following the publication of, in particular, Whitney Strieber's book, Communion, an author who had written some horror novels called The Howling, among others. Probably his best known work. They made several movies out of it. Whitley Strieber had published this, plus along with Bud Hopkins' work in the books Missing Time and Intruders. But once John Mack gets involved in this, he has the real credentials here, right? I mean, most professional scientists, doctors, or anyone he's really the only professional that I'm aware of. I mean, Bud Hopkins was an artist who became interested in UFOs. I mean, it's had no training in hypnosis or psychiatry or psychoanalysis. Here we have very credentialed professional interested in UFO abductions. And he subsequently published a book in 1994 that is called Abduction, which I plan to read. In fact, I've already ordered the book because we're going to do an episode on abductions. I've already read Bud Hopkins' books Intruders a long time ago. I'm going to do a little reading there, and I'm looking forward to reading this particular book. After that, and plus we're going to read some skeptical things and do a lot of research because it is such a big topic, right? I mean, abduction's one of those big ones. Like the episode on Roswell took an extra amount of research, and I feel like abductions is going to take even more, really, to at least from my point of view, to try and understand the whole phenomenon. John Mack goes down there in November, interviews some of the children with what they'd seen. Of course, they repeat essentially the same stories. Also, this is where the idea of some of the first emerges that there was telepathic communication. I mean, it's a good thing there was no car windows around that could be rolled up or down, is what I was thinking whenever the telepathic messages were going between the children.
Yep. The joke that doesn't get old.
But anyway, he confirms that, and you know, like I said, we've seen it on the movie The Phenomena, where he talks to these children, and they seem so sincere, and I really think an incident happened there, and it's a pretty amazing experience to have so many witnesses and to have such a common interpretation of what they saw.
Yeah, for sure. The thing that I found most interesting is I found a recent interview with Gunter Hoffner. He's older now, 20 years have gone by, and he gave some information that I have not seen anywhere else. Gunter goes in on Monday with Cynthia, and they go out and they look at the first landing site. Then they come back to the playground, and some of the kids point out a second landing site. Gunter goes over to the second landing site because after going to the first site, he doesn't notice anything on the ground. He does say that a drought had been going on. The ground was very hard, so it would have been difficult for something to leave an impression in the ground unless it was incredibly heavy. So the ground was almost like rock, and there's a lot of dead brush and dead brown grass around, but it's high grass still yet. He goes back to the playground. They point out a separate landing spot, and he goes over and checks that area out. I think this is on the Monday, and he checks it out, and he notices that there are two oval impressions on the ground of something that's two large oval impressions on the ground. I think he said they were 15 to 20 centimeters long and 5 centimeters wide, but that may have been like the 15 to 20 centimeters long and 5 centimeters wide might have been the landing struts where they may have been down. There were smaller ones. He did take some pictures, which I haven't seen, though in that interview, he did share some of the pictures that he had taken because he did have a camera with him. And then he returns on the weekend, either Saturday or Sunday or both days, and collects some soil samples and sends those off to be analyzed. The results of that analysis comes back as inconclusive. There's nothing really significant there, or the anomalies that they did find in the soil really didn't fall outside of what would be expected to an extreme degree. So they didn't worry about that so much. Now, all the information that he collected, that Tim Leach collected, and that Cynthia Hine collected has been gathered up and is now in the under the control of a Swedish company, which has scanned and is storing all those documents and all that information in an archive. And I'm going to see if I can find that. I wasn't able to find who that company was or where they have those documents, but I'm going to see if I can track that down. A second landing site with some actual physical evidence is something that I don't think was mentioned before. The other thing is that Gunter had looked up into the hills and had noticed that there was some reflection coming off of a rocky outcropping down from the school. And he thought, well, maybe it could be, because this is common in South Africa, that they would use sheet metal for some of their buildings, part of the roof or the sides, and it could have been the light reflecting off of that. But then when he looked up shortly later, he got no reflection. So maybe the sun had moved, or maybe they were watching him.
I mean, I think the kids were out there playing in that playground every day. I mean, I don't see where suddenly they notice a reflection off the roof or whatever, and then, oh, look, it's a landed flying saucer. They definitely saw something that was different that day.
Right. But it could have been the gardener. He's got his marijuana weed plants he's growing, and he's moving the little building, to a different location because of the drought. He gets closer to a water source.
Yeah, I'm not sure John Mack, back on him, I'm not sure if in the book Abduction, I'm not sure if it was published before or after this incident occurred. I'm not sure what he came up with on it. I haven't received my book yet. I was hoping to get it and be able to at least see if there's a section there on this school sighting. Did you know John Mack, it's really weird, on September 27th, 2004, it's about 10 years after this incident occurred, he was in London at a lecture that was sponsored by the T.E. Lawrence Society, and he was killed by a drunken driver as he was walking home after dinner with some friends.
The driver's name was Glorp Schnitschnar. He had a big head and large eyes.
Yep.
You think maybe John got a little bit too close?
Yeah, I just found that to be, I don't know, kind of no doubt will play into some conspiracy theories there. But anyway, what do you make of this episode? Is there anything else you need to add on this? I mean, here we have it. We had large number of school children. Some had some very close encounters, had telepathic messages, mostly about the environment, saying we're killing the planet, but also about technology. And I remember that being interesting to me, that some of the girls or women now said they remember the message being the technology, us embracing technology was a mistake. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but that, the environmental message. And I don't know, we get that a lot from UFO encounters. Whenever they say they have an important message, it's always you're killing the planet.
Drink more Ovaltine.
Something about nuclear bombs or something like that. I wish just once, if this is really a thing, that the aliens, if you're tuning into our podcast, give us a message that is really useful. Give us a message that proves this is real. Something that could only be, it would have to be investigated, right? Just something that we couldn't think of, or a school child could definitely not think of, or your average experiencer or abductee could think of on their own if they're just an average person. Something that would take something about quantum physics or something very detailed, that the average human being would know about, that would require some type of expert to discover,
Right. I think what it is that this alien race is setting up there, and they have a television program called Punk the Humans. And they're just like, this week on Punk the Humans, we're going to go down and we're going to make ourselves visible only to school children. And then they're going to come down, and then we're going to mess with them, and we're going to give them telepathic messages. Like, you're not going to have any air because we're going to take your trees. And that's what I think is probably likely what's going on here, because you never see an alien on ever. We don't have any pictures of any aliens ever. So I think that's what's happening. They're punking us.
It could be, and maybe aliens have some kind of technology. I mean, here's my thing, right? Okay, if I were, first of all, let's look at today's modern home, right? I've got cameras around my house. Do you?
No.
I mean, I've got I've got cameras around my house now. Well, I sell this kind of stuff, so I've got a camera doorbell, right? A video doorbell. I've got cameras, relatively inexpensive.
You're part of Big Brother. You're part of the surveillance state. I ain't visiting you anymore.
Well, I'm just spying on myself.
Unless I come over and then you're spying on me.
All right, here's what I'm getting at.
Sure.
The technology now is inexpensive and very available and easy to use. Mm-hmm. If I were being abducted, I would damn sure have cameras pointing at my bedroom and the outside of my house all the time, 24/7, right? I mean, you've got that now, and it's not that expensive. If I had any inkling whatsoever that I was being abducted, I would employ technology to prove it.
I knew it. Fat hippie aliens are abducting me in the middle of the night.
But I don't know. I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you have no evidence anywhere. I mean, as we become even more big brother, I mean, London has cameras every 5 feet. No aliens there.
But I don't know, man. It's such a strange phenomenon. I find this particular case to be very, very interesting because of the multiple witnesses. One issue I've always had about alien encounters and alien abductions, they almost always occur alone. Well, there's very significant exceptions. One is Betty and Barney Hill, which is the first one, which was 2 people. The Pascagoula abduction was 2 people. Mm-hmm. You have Travis Watton, who was the one person that was abducted, but the witnesses all saw a flying saucer, saw him get zapped or whatever, and then he disappeared for several days. Here we have not an abduction situation, but most certainly a contact situation, communication with aliens. Got all these school children that definitely saw something.
Well, definitely saw something, or had this mass hysteria around this idea that they saw something.
Okay, I get you. I get that. So we'll just flip the coin here for a second. Let's look at the skeptical point of this. Let's see where the skeptics fall on this. And I know where they fall on this. The only thing they have is mass hysteria. And they say that mass hysteria is much more common in Africa, for whatever reason, than it is in other parts of the world among school children. But there's some problems with that as well.
Well, it's that elephant water. They got to drink that elephant water. It's been in the elephant's nose.
What it is?
Yeah, it's been in the elephant's nose. They spray it out, and then they got to drink it. And, it's got parasites in it.
Yeah, let me find the...
No, I mean, you've got kids who are 6 to 12 years old, and they're on a playground, and they're getting bored, and their imaginations are flying off the handle, and, you got some kids saying, I see aliens, I see little aliens, I see spaceships. They're going to come and get you.
All right, so yeah, let's look at that. So this is what the skeptics are saying, essentially. Let me do this. Let me punch it in. Ariel. This paper, published in the Malawi Medical Journal.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
Malawi. He goes to describe what mass hysteria is. It's a common term used to describe a situation in which various people all suffer from similar unexplained symptoms. Hysterical contagion consists of a quick dissemination within a collection of people of a symptom or a set of symptoms for which no physical explanation can be found. Mass hysteria typically begins when an individual becomes ill or hysterical during a period of stress. Here's some documented episodes of mass hysteria in African schools. That's the whole point of this. And then they also have a little summary at the end to try and determine why this is among African schools, or why we see more mass hysteria. In 1999, there was a high school in Uteman, Eastern Cape of South Africa. Let's see, a few days before the outbreak of the epidemic, it was noted that during the morning prayers, a few female students had fallen down unconscious. They were taken to a staff room and a few minutes later regained consciousness. The pupils went on to attend class as usual, On the morning of the 21st of May, 1999, during morning prayers, female students started screaming and falling in rapid succession. A total of 50 students out of a population of 765 were involved. There was a complete pandemonium at the school. Ambulances and private cars were used to ferry those affected to local hospitals.
Yeah, I wonder if that's sort of like the fainting goats, where you go out and you go, blah, and all the goats fall over.
Right.
You know, there's an episode of House. You ever watch that show, House, with the one-legged doctor played by Hugh Laurie, who's a jerk? And he's on an airplane, and everybody starts getting sick and throwing up and doing all kinds of other stuff, and it just turns out it's mass hysteria. That was a good episode.
And I mean, it's a real phenomenon. But here's another one. In 2002, at a primary school another one in South Africa, 27 children who had been well when they left their homes collapsed at school, displaying tremors and shivers throughout their body. Many of the children also presented with abdominal cramps and nausea.
There was a math test on that day.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, witchcraft, poisoning, and insect bites were proposed as causes to this strange behavior.
Witchcraft.
But nobody could find anything wrong. In 2009, Pretoria High School in South Africa, dozens of children collapsed, screaming, and unexplained convulsions and fits. Hysteria started when a grade 9 girl collapsed at her desk. Within moments, the unexplained attack of about 25 pupils in various classes and grades were affected and started screaming hysterically, fainting, convulsed as they succumbed to a strange occurrence.
Drama queen. I'm just saying.
Anyway, they go on. In Tanzania in 1962, there was quite a few schools that experienced some things like this. In 2008, 20 girls lost consciousness. I mean, this goes on and on.
Chapter 23, Zaire. Another case of mass hysteria. How many chapters of these things are we going to go through?
That's it. I'm going to say, but I'm just trying to give an example here. And they list quite a few. But in all of them, it's something a little different.
In all of them, a math test was taking place on that day.
Maybe. Mostly occurs like the kids are having seizures or having some kind of mystery sickness or whatever. And then they lump the 1994 September case here at Ariel School into mass hysteria as well. But none of these kids reported being sick or anything. They just had a UFO sighting.
Yeah.
But and in no way does it represent any of the other cases. Every single we could go on and on with these, right?
Well, don't
Zambia,
Uganda. Hey, don't you think these kids in Zimbabwe should be given a gold star for thinking outside the box of mass hysteria?
Maybe so.
Just saying.
But I mean that's all that skeptics have. And then of course for the UFO sightings, and they point out UFO sightings were really being talked about in the area because we had the wave of sightings and everybody's calling in. In fact, the radio station's encouraging people to call in, the local radio station. There were a few other sightings, the truck driver that saw an alien on the side of the road. I don't know if that was out in the news or not, but most certainly the UFO sightings that had happened prior to this sighting were being talked about, right? I don't know. I mean, that's the only explanation they have. I mean, they're not saying it's a hoax or anything. But, of course, the skeptics point out many of the children were interviewed in groups and that sort of thing. I noticed John Mack didn't interview in groups. All the children were individual. But by then, it had been 2 or 3 months had passed. I don't know. I think it's a very intriguing incident with so many witnesses, even if they are children, so many similarities in what they saw.
I think this reminds me of the Batman incident. So when I was about 10,
the Batman incident.
About 10.
Am I going to find that on Wikipedia?
No, unless I put an entry in. I might do it after this episode. So when I was about 10 years old, I had Batman was on television. It was probably reruns because I think it was the 1960s probably when the Adam West Batman was on television. But they continued to show into the 70s. So when I was 10, I had gotten for Christmas the Batmobile and this little Batman action figure, which was really cool. I loved it to death. Now, at some point, my Batman disappeared. Now, I have my thoughts on who stole my Batman, but...
I mean, you had... What do you got? 2 brothers, a sister?
2 brothers. I got cousins. I mean, the neighborhood was full of little sticky-fingered thieves. I mean, they were everywhere.
Right. They probably liked your Batman, too.
Right. Now, I contend that my brother Clint took it, and then he broke it and buried it somewhere. He was the burying kind. So But I can't say that for sure. My memory from that time is a little blurry, but what I can tell you with absolute certainty is that I had a Batman with a Batmobile and that my brother Clint had shifty eyes. So I can tell you those three things, right? But I can't say anything beyond that. Now you got these kids who see something extraordinary, and 20 years later they come back and they are no nonsense about it. They were no nonsense about it when they were 12, and they're no nonsense about it now. I saw something. What I saw was not of this earth, and these big-eyed jerks were trying to abduct me into their Michael Jackson spaceship.
And tell me not to use cell phones when I grow up.
Exactly. You have to use a rotary phone. So that is what gives me pause on this case. I mean, I can see a path where this is nothing more than the imagination of children getting out of hand. But I can also see, and I actually lean the other way, that it's that something happened, that they saw something really unusual, and then maybe it was the gardener, and then again, maybe it wasn't.
I think it's something extraordinary happened there. I mean, the only skeptical or thing they have is mass hysteria. That's it. I mean, mass hysteria is a thing, but it doesn't really resemble mass hysteria as we... I mean, there's really weird cases of mass hysteria, like where people can't stop laughing. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
There was a dancing mass hysteria where there was a village where people started dancing and they couldn't stop dancing. It's like everybody had to dance. I mean, this is real. It's documented. People just dancing in the streets. You know, I can't stop dancing.
Everybody safety dance.
Yeah.
So, of course, that wasn't safety dance. I think some of those people died from exhaustion.
Yeah, I mean, it is a strange, real phenomenon, but at the same time, I don't feel like this really fits what reading I've done on mass hysteria, particularly in these African schools, that this medical paper had written about and included in the mass hysteria. It was very unique in that listing. The other children displayed symptoms of a sickness or an illness or seizures. You know, that's none of that at this school. The school was a UFO landing and having an experience with some of the occupants, and several of them had some type of telepathic connection. Now, maybe that's stretching it a little bit. I don't know. As adults, they remember it very clearly and talked about how while that message, I remember one girl very specifically, a woman now, who said, I remember having this feeling, and then when the connection was broken, it was all gone. Like she had all these bad feelings all in, going through her mind about the environment and technology, like this. It wasn't spoken in words. It was like impressions that were being made on her. And then she said when the connection was broken, it all just left, just flowed out of my body is how she said it. It's very interesting. Listeners, if you get a chance, check out the movie Phenomenon. Jimmy and I talk about this thing all the time. So if you listen to this podcast regularly, go ahead and watch it because then you'll understand what we refer to. But that is the final one that he does on there. Now, like I said, there's other things I don't agree with in that movie. For instance, Roswell, as we pointed out, you're led to believe that it's a crash saucer, the way it's edited and such. And that's fine. Most everybody else does too. The Zimbabwe case here, man, the Ariel school incident is very unique in the world of UFO incidents.
I almost got on the phone with you to talk with you about pushing this off just a little bit longer, because there is a movie that's been in the works for quite a long time, a documentary. It's being put together by Randall Nickerson. It's due out this month. You can pre-order it now, and I'll include a link on the website for this episode where you can go and check it out. I'm going to go ahead and pre-order it, get it, and then maybe we'll follow up on if there's any additional information on that. But he's been working on it for quite a long time, and it's just now getting ready to come out.
Is it on specifically the Ariel school?
It is. It is nothing but it's called the Ariel Phenomenon.
Well, that sounds great. I can't wait to watch that. And plus, in the meantime, I should be getting the book of John Mack published, so there may be some insights that he had in that book. So I'm hoping that it does cover that. I don't know. The book may have been published before And he maybe never wrote about it. I don't know. But I would be very interested to find out if he did and to see what he thought about it. So, Jimmy, you got anything else you want to add to the Ariel School UFO encounter?
I think the only thing I would like to say is that if any UFO sightings of aliens is real, I hope this one is definitely real, because I think I could take one of those little jerks in an arm wrestling contest. They're spindly.
I hope you're not talking about the school children.
I didn't consider that. I could probably take them too.
All right, then. Well, I don't really have anything else to add on this one. I mean, it's a very interesting case, and I think we may have a follow-up on this one down the road if we find out more. Before we get out of here, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and look at our webpage. If you'd like to support the show, go to CosmicSponge.com and look for the coffee cup icon in the upper right-hand corner. That's called Buy Me a Coffee. And also the link beside that will take you to Patreon, which can give you access to our other show exclusively for our Patreon subscribers, known as Weird Wonders. Contact information is firstcontact@CosmicSponge.com. Thank you so much for listening. So this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and we'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. We'll catch you next week.
You know, I don't know if you actually could beat one of those kids in arm wrestling. I mean,
some of them looked a little tough. They play in the outback with poisonous snakes, so they're probably got a good constitution.
I don't know, maybe.
That one girl was pretty beefy.
Yeah. All right, man, let's get out of here.
All right, later. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account at firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. If you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/CosmicSponge, where you get access to exclusive content, including our Weird Wonders news and stories released every week. To explore everything Cosmic Sponge has to offer, including other ways to support the show, head on over to our website at www.cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.